Hi, I'm Corey.
Hi, I'm Tess.
Welcome to A Lovely Place.
We're so glad you've joined us as we invite Jesus into the midst of our lives, learning, and laughter.
We hope this podcast can encourage your heart and make you smile today.
Hello, my friend.
Hello.
We're going to talk about emotions today. Woohoo!
Woo! I like talking about emotions.
I think we talk about them all the time.
Yes.
Don't we on here? That's why we like to talk to each other.
It's true. It's taken us a while, though, right? We've taken a lot of classes and stuff. So I have to remember that. My counselor reminds me, not everybody likes to really think through what they're feeling and then talk about it. It's not everybody likes doing that. And I'm like, okay, I thought I need to remember everybody's different.
Yes. Well, and then it's like, I don't know that I like doing it, but I like the other side of it.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Amen. I'm glad we're on the same track because it would be lonely if we weren't friends.
It's true.
Yes.
It's true.
So we're talking about famous at home. I'll say it that time, and then you can say their names because I feel like I mess it up.
Yeah, by Dr. Josh and Christy Straub.
Yes.
I elongate their last name for some reason. I'm not quite sure why.
To make sure you get all the Straub. Yeah, they are good. I appreciate them, and I was listening to, I guess it was just the book. I think I listened to one of their podcasts the other day or something, and I was like, oh, there's just so lots of good information that they're sharing and living through to get to share.
Yes, I appreciate their vulnerability to share their struggles and some of, because I think sometimes famous people try to avoid people knowing the ugly, messy parts of their lives. That's why we have paparazzi, because they're like, oh, everybody wants to know that, but they try to keep it hidden. And I appreciate that Josh and Christy are willing to share their ugly, messy parts for the purpose of helping other people to grow. It's not just to share the details, but it's so other people can grow and also see I'm not alone in these struggles. There's other people that struggle the same way or different ways or whatever,
Well, and then just that coming alongside of other people that are talking about their emotions and encouraging you to do that. That's like you were saying, your counselor is saying not everybody does that. And it's like, oh yeah, not everybody is seeking this, but I don't know what it's called.
Yeah. Well, they were talking about empathy is the ability to
thank you.
Or emotional intelligence is knowing what you're feeling.
Yes.
And being able to express it. And then empathy is knowing what others are feeling and being able to feel that with them. So the journey of emotional intelligence.
That's awesome.
And one thing my counselor reminds me of too is that just because someone else isn't taking that as seriously as I do doesn't mean they're worse than I am. It's not a judgment thing.
No.
It's just a grace thing, grace that we all learn at our own paces. We all have different amounts of free time to do things. My husband works a whole ton during the week, so
yeah,
the time that he has to devote to reading and things like that are a lot smaller than mine. And so to have grace that that God may communicate with him in a completely different way, or he may learn in a completely different way. And it's okay to be different,
Yeah.
'Cause we're not meant to be all the same. So thank goodness. Life would be boring. Whew. Might be easier, but it would be boring.
Yes.
So the decisions that we're talking about today are decisions 3 and 4, which is 3 is talk about emotions, and 4 is listen to your spouse's heart. So I am always interested to read about the brain and how the brain works. And so Josh goes into that quite a bit in the emotions chapter. Excuse me. Which I appreciated because it reminded me when he was talking about, the different parts of your brain and what they do and how they work and all of those things, how they work together. It just reminded me of and emotional eating that we had featured. And that one of the things that she said was like naming an emotion or what you're feeling lowers your distress about that feeling if you can name it. And so I want to remember that as we, delve into talking about emotions. Like, I think sometimes people can think that it's safer to not talk about it because they don't know what will happen if they open the door.
Yeah.
But so to remind us that by naming those things, just the act of naming them lowers your distress already, and then like you said, you like getting to what happens on the other side of talking about emotions, which is being in a healthier place and channeling them in the right way. Hopefully that would be the next step.
Right. Well,
I struggle with that one.
Yes, because I get too much, like, if I'm not paying attention to self-care or paying attention to what my body is telling me, then it just explodes all out. And then it's like, oh, what were all those words again? And so it's like, I'm not sure how many word chart. Like when we were reading End Emotional Eating, I was putting words in the cupboard because I was looking for emotions in there, or I had emotions and I wanted to eat them.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Instead of feel them. But it was like, I looked up Josh and Christy's book that they wrote, Two Kids, but it looked a little bit younger than Riker. Not that it wouldn't still be helpful, but so if you have younger preschool age kids, I think that would be like perfect, right on target for them.
Yes.
And then
it's a really good book. We have it. And the boys, Spencer was a little too old for it when we bought it. Jackson appreciated it, and I think Rihanna will like it too.
Yeah.
Because it's very rudimentary, for young kids. So an older kid might need a few more words, but you never know what space they're in, like if they're really struggling with knowing what they're feeling, a little kid book might be helpful, at least to, like pick onto something major, like. Yeah.
And then take it to that next level, like.
Right.
If you're feeling that or not. Yes.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that about how they're approaching things. And I liked Christy's example of with talking with her daughter and trying to get curious about what was happening and uncovering what was going on. Like the little girl wasn't just freaking out to just freak out and make her parents mad. It was what had happened earlier in her day.
Yeah.
And so I just thought how powerful that was, that the little girl was able to say she felt embarrassed and something at her friend's house or left out or something.
They
I can't
had
remember.
wanted to play by themselves, so they locked her out of whatever room they were playing in.
Yeah. And how terrible would that feel?
Yeah.
Like that would make me not feel happy later in my day.
Yeah.
Or just at the end of my, want to throw more counseling words out there, window of tolerance.
Yes.
Of where, and that is just when you lose it.
Right? Yes. Like how much you can tolerate before you fly off the handle. Right.
And exactly.
Yeah. And the theory behind that is that everybody has a window of tolerance, but then trauma and difficult situations or physical needs not being met or all these other things shrink our window.
Yes.
We learned about it in context with like kids ministry and keeping the window of tolerance in mind when working with kids, and also kids from like a trauma background and stuff like that. So it's important to remember, but I think sometimes we think for ourselves and for other people. You should just be able to handle this. Like, why are you struggling, or what's going on? And then it's like, I heard this word picture the other day where it was talking about specifically kids on the autistic spectrum, but, like trying to balance all these different plates or no, it was like cups on a plate, like a waiter. And it was talking about how everything that's coming in, whether it be a sensory input or emotions or, something, that happened earlier in their day, like there are all these little drops that are dripping into the cups. And you maybe did a small thing, like you gave them the wrong colored plate or something, like the one they didn't ask for or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not that thing is a huge earth-shattering thing, but maybe it was the last drop in the cup that unbalanced to the tray and then just sent everything flying. And so the window of tolerance is real and so hard to know for ourselves and our kids. Like, where are you at right now? Where. So, yeah. So I love how she entered into that interaction with her daughter with grace and curiosity, because I'm not very good at doing that sometimes. I want to be better at that, of being curious instead of just like, what is your deal? Because that's not helpful. I don't like it when people talk to me that way.
No. Yeah. It's like, wait a minute, what's happening here? And then but then I like that Josh and Christy made it a point to put words into their family's hands, to be able to say, here, these are words that we all get to use, and we can respect whichever word you're experiencing, whatever feeling, not just word, but,
right.
So I appreciate that. And I want to be more like them.
Yes. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
I love what they said. They were talking about John Gottman again and his insight. And they said, this is a quote from John Gottman, which says, "My child isn't giving me a hard time. My child is having a hard time."
Yes.
And then Christy said, "Kennedy in her defiance was having a hard time. When our kids are anxious, they need someone to help them assign proper meaning to their circumstance, just as God does with us when we verbalize our worries and fears to him in prayer." And I love, there was another quote where I think Josh said, "As parents, we help wire our kids' brains by how we show up for them in their most emotionally vulnerable moments." And I think that reminds me, that goes back to, how am I managing my own stress? Because if I'm not managing my stress, I can't possibly show up in a grace-filled way when my kids are stressed. I'll just be like, your stress is making my stress worse, and then I'm making your stress worse, and it's crazy,
Yeah. Well, and it makes me think about the example earlier in the book on the little boy and the rubber band that was very important to the little boy, and why it was, who knows. But Josh was like, oh, I decided to honor the rubber band.
Mm-hmm.
Go pick up a rubber band from the friend's house where it got left or whatever. And just like, I just appreciate that. So then I've had different conversations with Riker, being able to just like feel like I don't have to fix the problem, but I just need to enter into his moment and help him to know, like, oh yes, this is a hard thing, or that is frustrating, or that's uncomfortable, or whatever it is, that I don't have to fix it.
Yeah.
And that's hard because it's like you want to just do that. Because was that in a different thing I was listening to? They were talking about their kid on the playground? Or was that...
I don't remember.
Okay. But anyways, it was like the kid came home from school and said, didn't like whatever happened it was Susie at the playground. And they were going to be like, oh, that's okay, you'll have tomorrow to fix it or whatever. And it was like, oh, wait a minute. What if I just said, oh, I'm sorry that happened?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Like, and maybe that's all they need, to just have a a minute to
Yeah.
be able to learn how to sit in that feeling that is uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, and that
And
reminds me, I was talking to a couple friends the other day, and a couple of my mom friends, and we were talking about how sometimes how stressful it is and how tiring it is when, you always feel like your kids need something from you. And it's, it can be so demanding.
yeah,
And, um, and then we kind of moved into the side of when they're like crying and upset and that sometimes we can get into this space of we just want them to be quiet. Like, we just want some peace or we just want some, whatever. And so we do whatever it will take to
yeah,
get them to stop crying or stop fussing or whatever. But then, it's like they can tell, like they
yeah.
can tell when we're genuinely not like we're just interested in moving them through whatever this is
Uh-huh.
instead of interested in sitting with them in it. And that's so much harder, like,
Yeah,
especially when you're, overwhelmed and feeling like there's just so much noise going on and all the other things. It's really hard to just be like, okay, I'm like, well, like they said, enter into your story. I'm just
uh-huh.
going to sit with you in this,
Yeah,
because you don't know what will happen. They might not stop crying for quite some time and it's uncomfortable, but God sits with us when we're, you
uh-huh.
know, uncomfortable and when we're maybe saying things that aren't so nice or, whatever it might be.
Yeah, yeah.
He's patient with us,
Well, and then
through.
like on the next decision is just listening to your spouse. So here we have lots of examples of emotions with our kids, but now it's like, how do we practice that with our spouse? And
Yeah.
how like that's a whole different mirror. I feel like it's like you have a different mindset with your husband is when your kids,
Right.
or I think I do, or just they have a different relationship. I guess that makes it different.
Yeah.
But it's like, and then my gap is when I learn something in the book and I'm like all excited about it, or I listen to a marriage podcast or something. And so I'm like, I'm having my fantasy marriage and we're doing all these things are just amazing and going really well. But I forget to include my husband in this. And I'm like, oh, you don't know what I'm talking about right now, do you? Or it's not like, he's not like fired up and passionate about making this change in our life. So it's like,
Yeah.
I have to come at this in a different way. And I want to practice this daily listening thing because that's what they were talking about, right?
Yeah. The 15
Yeah,
minutes a day.
yeah. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like a lot of time, or sometimes it sounds like a lot of time. Like it's like, how do you do that? But it seems like practicing is another way to start.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes. And figuring out like being a lazy genius, like when would this work the best? What time are we already like sitting down together in the same
yeah,
space or something,
yeah,
like figuring
yeah.
that out. Because sometimes it is hard to find time, but that what they were saying is you make time because it's important.
Right.
Um, and I love Josh laid out this whole, he called it the relationship moment worksheet. And he was talking about when he and his wife had a conflict about something
Yeah.
and he was standing in his closet kind of like trying to decide what do I say now, and he had said he had just gone through this conference that laid out how to use the worksheet. And it was like basically
Yeah, but he was teaching, right?
I don't know if he was teaching it or if he
Oh,
went
okay.
through it, but either way, he was like, okay, so I should be able to do this.
Yeah.
And it was like, you write down what your spouse said, and then the next spot is what you said, and then the third spot is how your spouse responded to that. And he was
Yeah.
like, examining, like in that middle spot, if I say you, then I'm blaming. But if I say I, then I'm
Uh-huh.
taking responsibility. And so that was, I think, a powerful picture of how we can change the direction of a conversation just by examining, like, am I blaming the other person and aiming, arrows at them, or am I willing to acknowledge my part in this and lay down the need to be right or the need to look good or whatever it might be to seek resolution,
Yeah. And I think in that example too, wasn't he talking about the tone that things were said to, and then like erasing the tone for a second just to hear what the words were, to try to like help you discover what maybe the intention was and not get so clouded by the tone of what was happening.
Yeah. Well, and I think he was talking too about how, like, he didn't remember how he sounded when he said all of those things, but Christy felt it,
Yes,
and
yes.
going back to how our brains work, the one side of our brain tells us the facts, but the other side of our brain tells us the feelings and, but they're both important. Like, you can't just do away with one of them,
What was the binding that put it together? Was just the fact that you go back and forth?
That's the binding is the corpus callosum, I think is what it's called. Let me see.
Yeah, I knew you have the whole pages, so I'm like, you can look back faster. I don't know how to go back on audio
the corpus callosum, which he calls the binding of the book. So it makes the linguistic, logical side work with the emotional, artistic side. Like, he's saying you can't read a book without both sides of the page, essentially. Like, the middle part puts them together and gives meaning to the entire story. And sometimes I think we like to focus for us, like, it's that whole, like, we judge others by their actions. We judge ourselves by our intentions or whatever, like, and I think sometimes we will put things in perspective of like, well, it made me feel this way, but then we don't necessarily think about it the other direction. Like, oh, I made you feel this way, like.
Right.
So I like the idea of having that time with your spouse. And, they suggest not to start out with things that are going on between you, but just things that are going on in your day. To share, what did they say? To share not just what happened, but what you felt about what happened.
Yeah.
In your 15, in the time that you share with each other.
Because that was the exercise that I did when I was walking through that Empty Arms book after our miscarriage, and it was the instruction was to write out your story and like just put all the facts in there of how it happened, or a timeline, or however your brain thought of it. But then after you did that, to go back and then put the feelings in, because she was saying sometimes when you recall something, it's easier just to go fact, 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 and not put any feeling in that, and then you just go on or whatever. So that made me think of that, and just like, but then it goes back to like, if you don't have the words to the feelings from the talk about your emotions, and it's hard to put them into what you were feeling.
Yeah.
So it goes together. Like, we need to have that vocabulary to be able to communicate that way.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yes.
And
so
then
true.
To give room or space for the other person to feel like they can say that too. Like, or I don't know, but maybe if you're not fighting when you're talking about it, then it's a little easier to hold space for someone else's emotions.
Yes. Well,
I don't know what you're talking about. Fighting? What?
Well, one thing that it reminded me of is, I don't remember what I was listening to, but it was talking about like spending 15 minutes a day of being on your spouse's team. Like, so for those of us who can, like me, who can move to fixing very easily, it's like a conscious reminder that anything they say, you're not fixing. You're just say, like, with statements like, oh, that, that sounds really frustrating, or, oh, that, I'm sure that was, whatever, or to not try to comment on the situation or what they could have done differently or what they could do in the future or all these other things, but
Right.
just to enter into their perspective and be present in there, and the times that I've been intentional to have those conversations with Daniel where I actually do that and I don't try to fix, he's actually told me, thank you for, like, I felt like you were really listening to me. And I'm like, oh, I should do this more often. It really helps. But then I
Yeah.
forget, because I like to fix things. Ugh. So, goodness.
It's nice that you want to fix things.
Yes.
Sometimes, right?
Sometimes, right? I
Yeah.
should fix things, not people.
Oh,
People are not things to be fixed. That's what I have to
Wow.
remind myself.
That's powerful.
Oh, I had a good conversation about that with my oldest yesterday. So, because he was getting mad at me for good reason. I was like trying to fix things. And then I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, you're not something I need to be like trying to make more efficient or all these other things. Like, you're a person and it's good, and I should stop. I want to stop doing that. Always like tweaking things. I like to make things efficient, but that doesn't make people feel nice when you do that to them. So,
Good.
yeah.
Yeah. Good job paying attention.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Ugh. Oh, goodness. Being a parent is difficult sometimes.
Yeah, because it's becoming.
Right, exactly.
Just to quote Josh there a little
Yes.
bit.
Yes. Well, our verse for the day is in the Psalms, and a little bit about this verse is that it's written by David when he was being pursued by Saul, when he hadn't done anything wrong, but Saul was bent on killing him, essentially.
Just a little.
No other way around that,
Just a little threat.
Just a
It's
little
fine.
murder.
Just hiding.
So this is a psalm that he wrote when he was hiding in a cave. Psalm 142. I cry aloud to the Lord. I lift up my voice to the Lord for mercy. I pour out before him my complaint. Before him I tell my trouble. When my spirit grows faint within me, it is you who watch over my way. In the path where I walk, people have hidden a snare for me. Look and see, there is no one at my right hand. No one is concerned for me. I have no refuge. No one cares for my life. I cry to you, Lord. I say, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Listen to my cry, for I am in desperate need. Rescue me from those who pursue me, for they are too strong for me. Set me free from my prison, that I may praise your name. Then the righteous will gather about me because of your goodness to me. And that psalm just reminded me that, like, David wasn't ashamed of what he was feeling. He wasn't, he didn't try to make it sound pretty or like, mince his words with God. He kind of just laid it out there as like, this is what I'm feeling. Like, which reminds me that it's good to let God in with our emotions and our relationships. Instead of just hoping that we can fix it on our own, or make it work. He's the one that makes it work.
And there's 150 Psalms in the Bible. That's quite a bit of the Bible taken up by this dialogue with our Maker, and in very vulnerable ways, and crying and sobbing and laying down and worshiping and dancing and it's like the full range of emotions is illustrated in here.
Yeah. And so many psalms of lament, like of sadness, of crying out. And I think sometimes in our culture anyway, we really don't like the uncomfortable emotions,
Right.
they are uncomfortable and we don't like things that are uncomfortable. So we shy away from them. But I think God wants us to be brave enough to enter in instead of running away and avoiding.
Yes. For at least 15 minutes a day. Just
Oh.
we can
Oh my
be with him
goodness.
even longer than that. We can be with him all day long.
It's
'Cause
true.
he is with us all day. Like that was what I was encouraging Riker today. Of you can find grace and mercy in a time of need. You can boldly come to him.
Yeah.
So I was just like, okay, we're not lost, friend.
Yeah.
You are seen and heard.
Amen. Amen.
Okay, go kiss your husbands or your wives today. Whoever you're married to, and talk about your feelings, friends.
There we go.
There we go. You heard it here on the Lovely Place podcast.
Oh my goodness. All right, friends. Well, we are working our way through this book. Oh, we have a few decisions left, and then we'll be on to the next book. So stay tuned to find out what that might be.
Yeah, we'll figure that out soon. Oh, just kidding.
All right.
All right.
Thanks for
Thank
listening.
you.
Bye.
Bye.